My favorite time of year is spring wildflower season. The temperature is mild and the bugs aren't that bad, and you're guaranteed to find something new every time you go outside. I don't live in an exciting place. There are no mountains, canyons, or ocean beaches. The land is flat, and a lot of it is developed with subdivisions and strip malls. The same 10 stores stamped over and over again, but in different configurations to keep it fresh. Fortunately, we have some pockets of protected forest. And in the springtime, before the trees fully leaf out, the woodland wildflowers bloom. The weather this year has been just wonky. So we had very little snow this winter. It wasn't that cold. And now in the early spring, it's much warmer than average. And so while the weather has been feeling lovely, wildflowers season will go really fast because of that. So they're already called spring ephemerals because they are so short-lived, and with consistently warmer temperatures, the flowers will bloom really quickly and die back even faster. So this just means that I have to go out now to see the wildflowers, or I might miss them completely. We're here. This is really beautiful. So I find myself standing in a sea of Virginia bluebells. Virginia bluebells are native wildflowers, even though they kind of have an aggressive tendency to spread and fill in big areas of the woodland to a really astounding effect. It's so gorgeous. Virginia bluebells have tubular flowers, which means they don't have separate petals. Instead, the petals have merged into kind of a tube. And they are typically blue, but there's sometimes pink Virginia bluebells, which is kind of rare, or more whitish pale blue flowers as well. Wild leek is these tufts of plants here. So when they are plentiful, they'll form colonies, so they'll look like these tufts of leaves, but each individual plant only has 2 to 3 leaves, like this one right here is 3 leaves. And they are also called ramps, and they are a pretty well-known wild plant. In some cases, they are too well-known, and they have been over-harvested, especially in Appalachia. So when you harvest wild leek, you harvest the full plant because it has an edible bulb and edible leaves. And so when you take the whole plant, it's not going to grow back. So that's kind of the issue. And people have really over harvested. Like if you see a plentiful patch of wild leeks and it's a place that you're allowed to harvest, you can just take a few. You don't have to take the whole colony. Another thing you can do is just to take one leaf off a plant, because then that plant will regrow again the next year. And I've done that. That's how I harvest wild leek, because I don't have access to big plentiful colonies. And the leaves are kind of succulent. They really have that oniony flavor, and great chopped up in salads or made into a wild leek pesto. Dutchman's breeches get their name from the fact that their flowers look like little upside down Dutchman pants, apparently. They definitely look like little upside down pants. They're very cute. And their leaves are very feathery in appearance because they're compound and deeply lobed. Dutchman's breeches are spread by ants, actually. So their seeds have a fleshy, fatty appendage on it that attracts the ants. Now the ants pick up the seeds and bring them home. And then so the seeds are all spread out now where the ants have brought them. So the ants eat that fatty part, and then the seeds sprout from there. Spring Beauty is a very delicate and beautiful spring wildflower. They have very small white flowers with thin pink veins on the petals, and then they have 2 narrow leaves that kind of appear sparkly in the sun. Spring Beauty has edible tubers, but they really aren't an efficient wild food because they are so tiny, and they're sometimes called fairy spuds because of that. But they have a really nice texture too. So it's worth digging up a few tubers from very dense, healthy Spring Beauty patches because again, if you're digging up that tuber, you're killing the whole plant. So it's not an efficient wild food for sustenance, but it is a fun one. Wild ginger has these very cute heart leaves. I like them a lot. And they have small flowers. You have to look for them though. So the flowers are underneath the leaves here, and they are actually the color of my shirt. I was gonna say reddish brown, but a reddish brown maroon kind of color. And their seeds are also spread by ants. So they have that fleshy appendage that attracts the ants who then disperse the seeds. Wild ginger is edible. So its rhizomes are edible and they have a subtle ginger smell and flavor, but it's a lot more subtle than true ginger. So I had a friend and she harvested the rhizomes and baked them into a bread, and it was really good, but again, very subtle ginger flavor. Bloodroot is a gorgeous flower, and each flower only blooms for 1 to 2 days. So you're pretty lucky if you get to see a beautiful bloodroot flower because they don't last long. And its leaves are a very unique shape, kind of this wavy shape that once you know it, you'll definitely spot it pretty easily. And the leaves, so when it's flowering, the leaves are curled around the flowering stalk and then it unfolds once the flower fades. And its seeds are also dispersed by ants, like we talked about with a couple other wildflowers. And another fun fact about bloodroot is that it is a traditional Native American medicine. The root is specifically, however, it's very potent and could be dangerous in large doses. So it's definitely something you only want to use under the guidance of a very experienced herbalist. Cutleaf toothwort is easy to identify by its cut leaves. So the leaves have deeply cut lobes, and then the margins, the edges, are zigzagged or toothed. They have a group of white flowers. Each flower has 4 petals each, which is characteristic of the mustard or brassica family. And this family used to be called cruciferous because of the flowers. So the petals are arranged into a cross or a crucifix, hence cruciferous. Trilliums, so they get their name because they have 3 leaves each, and then they have a single flower with 3 petals each. Around here, there are 2 common types of trillium. There is the prairie trillium that has mottled leaves and a smallish red flower with recurved petals. And then I'm standing next to the white trillium, also called large flowering trillium, more specifically. And it has solid leaves, so they don't have the mottling. They're just a solid light green leaf and a beautiful big white flower. I didn't used to like where I lived, but since learning to identify local plants and some animals, I'm starting to identify my place in this landscape too. A new world truly opens up to you when you learn to identify what's around you. So for me, what used to just be an expanse of green, it's now great flowering trillium and shagbark hickory and Solomon seal. You learn the language of the landscape, and I'm able to read it, at least just a little. And that alone, it's grounding, it's orienting, and I feel like less of a stranger here. There are a heck of a lot of plants out there. Don't be overwhelmed, just ease into it. So for example, I started with learning the trees on my walk from my apartment to my college classes, and I built on it from there. So I'm far from a plant ID expert, but I can tell you that my perception has completely changed, and there's a richness that never used to exist. Therefore, this video comes with a warning. Once you start to identify local plants, your life will never be the same again. And I know that sounds dramatic, but once you spark that curiosity and start learning the language of the landscape, you won't be able to ignore a weed growing in a crack in the sidewalk any more than you're able to ignore a sea of blooming flowers in the woodlands. So I dare you. Change your perception, change your vision, and reintroduce richness back into your daily life.